Hey everybody, welcome back to the Flick and Reel Fancast. I'm with my guest here, Scott Fox. We are continuing to talk about the movie landscape of 2020, and we want to wrap up our discussion with a conversation about what is still left, or what we think might still be left for the year. Scott, how confident are you feeling in some of these release dates with everything moving?
Considering that we were told it was 15 days to flatten the curve in March, and now we are in almost October, and we're at 150 days to flatten the curve. I'm not confident in any of this because nothing with the movies or the theaters or any of that. This idea that if there's a spike with the cold flu season and COVID having a resurgence, that we'll see possibly even shutdowns. My confidence in these movies is more that some of them will go video on demand and do the route of Bill and Ted's, the route of...
So not so much changing dates, but changing release.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your engagement method is going to change whether you're seeing it at a theater or not. I think that's where I'm more confident. Some of these will come out. The question is how, and some of them will be pushed back quite some time. But then we also have to start thinking about, are they going to... We talked about this on the earlier portion of the podcast. Are these movies going to then be competing with the next properties that are coming down the pipe?
Right, because unless this continues to be just as bad or worse in 2021, we are assuming that most things that were originally slated for 2021 that are in the process of filming again or that are finishing up, we assume that they're going to stick. That they're not going to get pushed to 2022.
Yep.
So 2021 will be a busy movie year, potentially. So one of the first things... we brought it up a little bit in our last cast, is Wonder Woman 84 on its now 6th release date at the tail end of 2020, seeing the shining white light into the next year. It'll be coming out on Christmas, or I guess technically Christmas Eve because it's Thursdays. So hopefully Merry Christmas to us,
I believe this will come out on this date, but I believe it will be a cross-platform release with...
You think that's the next step?
Theater combined with... Because some people do want to go to the theater, and if you can, you get it. Some people will... And I believe they'll release it for video on demand, but with the newfound blend with HBO Max and Warner DC, I think may see something... I don't think they'll limit it like Disney did with Mulan. I think what we'll see is maybe you'll get a better rate by getting it through HBO Max. Maybe get a discounted rate for the movie, something of that nature.
Get a single watch or something.
A rental rate,
yeah.
As opposed to, and maybe you don't get to purchase it, but you can rent it for a certain amount. I think we'll see that because it's been pushed so far. I don't think they can hold off much longer without running into the next properties. Because next year you got Batman coming out.
Yeah.
And nothing against Wonder Woman, but go head to head with Batman is like the most recognizable, other than Superman, it's the most recognizable comic book character on the planet. And so to try and say you're going to go toe to toe with the number one franchise,
well, they got a little bit more breathing room because mid production, Battinson himself got COVID, so that got pushed back almost. I think it's like 8 months.
Which stinks. Give him time to bulk up, though.
Yeah, we know how much he enjoys doing that. I agree with you with the cross-platform kind of release, and one of the reasons I think why that would be a great idea is if you're going to make it available to buy and get the full purchase value of like say $30, it's Christmas, you know, and it's not like it's something you have to wrap, so you can like Christmas morning or something be like, hey everybody, Christmas present, here's Wonder Woman.
And we discussed earlier, for the studios, that's almost pure profit.
Yeah.
Especially with the partnership between DC and HBO Max right now and how closely knit they are. That could be a huge win. And it could also help boost the platform because HBO Max is still getting its getting a footing with all this stuff. they have a great catalog, but they're still getting a footing.
You know, it would be guaranteed subscription and just like send HBO Max like just like over the top of the mountain is if they say within like Christmas week or something, if you subscribe to HBO Max or whatever, you get to watch Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Oh, it's just add it to the platform.
Yeah.
If you've
for like a week.
Yeah.
And then after that, then paid whatever. But the amount of people that would come flooding into HBO Max, and I mean, you'd have to have a caveat there that's like month guaranteed subscription or like a couple months.
Well, the monthly subscription for HBO Max is $15, and which is not bad. It's more than some. But the content
consider the library that's been added to it now.
That's the thing is they've got so much. All of the Game of Thrones series, which is great up until I guess season 8, or the last 3 episodes. The catalog is deep. This could be a great way for DC to help build their own brand within HBO Max.
Absolutely.
And help bolster that. Because if you go on to HBO Max, then you have the full DC catalog.
And I don't think they can. They need to learn from Tenet because it's Warner Brothers again. I don't think they can take another hit of just forcing a movie in theaters and not making it available anywhere else because as of right now, Tenet is a hit.
And also, where compared to everything else, Tenet's massively hit. But we also saw with how poorly Mulan did by limiting the exposure to only Disney. I think that also gives us a learning experience to say, okay, maybe we don't do what Disney did. We use it as an opportunity to boost our platform, or we just put it on all platforms and get it out everywhere. I think we will see Warner make a wiser decision by putting it everywhere and trying to boost that way.
And what's unfortunate is what you brought up before we actually started recording is that not enough studios are learning from Universal and what they did with Trolls because my understanding is that Trolls 2, just based off of profit, made more than Trolls 1 because they didn't have to have a theatrical cut.
Yeah, there's... and it's a bubblegum kids movie. It's pop music and dancing and flashy colors and
Wonder Woman or Black Widow or any of these giant releases.
And that movie is still good. It's still catchy. Kids like to watch it. But they found a way to say, you know what? We're not going to recoup all our money that we used to make this movie. But if we go to streaming, we put it out there. Yeah, it cuts the theater out. But in a time of uncertainty, you have to protect your asset. And that means capitalizing on the money you can get. And that's what they did. I'm all for what Universal did to make the money with Trolls World Tour because they're responsible to their shareholders. And they have this property they spent $100 million on. And if they can get back $75 million of those dollars through video on demand, get paid. Do what you got to do. And it's kind of like for you and I, our regular job, right? Mm-hmm. During COVID, things are very unsure and unreliable.
Get a paycheck where you can get a paycheck.
You get paid where you can get paid. You don't have to worry about it whether this is the long-term permanent solution. You're just trying to get money to be able to keep your bills paid, and this allowed Universal to recoup a huge amount of money. So why wouldn't they do it? I think that actually Universal doing that set a better trend, and I think that we've just seen some other people try and morph on that and see what they could get, and some were misses, Mulan specifically. So that's why I think we will see.
I think Bill and Ted followed that, and
Bill and Ted did okay. I don't know exactly what did Bill and Ted make.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it got well reviewed. I don't think it cost very much to make, so it didn't look very expensive. I'll say that.
No, they used a lot of practical effects, which is great because.
Well, their time traveling CGI looked like it was still in the 80s, which is okay.
But that's what you want from Bill and Ted.
Sure, that's
you
the charm
want it
of
to still feel like the 1987 Bill and Ted's, or whatever year that was. That's the beauty of it. But I think those are going to set some lines as far as how to learn. So I do think we will see Wonder Woman come out at Christmas, and we're going to see it either straight to video on demand or a hybrid video on demand with theatrical release. I just don't think that we're going to see another push. They can't continue to hold out.
And I hope you're right because I'm assuming that AMC's around here are. I don't think our situation in this county, in this state, is getting better at any kind of rate that will allow my favorite theaters to be open.
COVID would have to get up and walk out in order for
All right, I'm head
positive
out.
change. Yeah, exactly. Like everybody with COVID, just leave. But that's not really fair either. And don't breathe on anybody when you're leaving.
Well, what you don't know is that abandoned like hotel that's right across the street from here is where they were like putting patients for a while. We called it the Corona Hotel here.
That is the most reassuring thing I've heard all week. Why didn't we just move them into theaters? Anyways, they could make money that way.
Okay, moving on to, so this is interesting, Pixar's Soul. So it was moved once, because I think it was originally supposed to come out in either June or July. I don't know if you've seen the trailers for it. It looks like a really charming movie. I'm looking forward to seeing it. They recently announced in one of their, I don't know if it was a shareholders meeting or whatever, but where they announced all the dates that are moving, they reaffirmed that they are not moving Soul. So they're still trying to hang tight onto this November 20th date, which is not all that far away.
No.
I think there might be a little hesitant after Mulan of just throwing it onto their...
Again, I think this would be a situation where either they pull it, well, again, we could say everything. Either they pull it, they release it, or they do whatever. I think my personal opinion would be, if they were trying to be smart about this, they release it video on demand and in theaters, cross-platform, you let everybody have a shot at it. You have to put your product in front of everybody. Otherwise, you don't sell. That's basic business, is to get your product where everyone has access to it.
Because I think Tenet and Mulan, I think both kind of suffered a similar flaw, which is Tenet was exclusively in theaters. Some of us can't go to theaters.
Yep.
Mulan was exclusively on Disney Plus. Not everybody has it.
Correct.
But it was on Disney Plus and at a premium charge that was pretty nasty.
Yeah, $30
On
and
top
I'm
of
already
your
paying,
subscription.
$6.99 or $9. I don't even know what the charge is.
It's around like $70.
Yeah. Either way, I'm paying that every month, and then I got to pay $30 to get this movie, or I just wait for it to be free.
Yeah. Also in December it was going to be free, and the problem is it leaked, and then they had to announce it. So when everyone heard that, they're like, "Oh, okay."
Well, for $30 for a movie, especially one that turns out is not actually for my kids, I'm gonna go ahead and wait on that.
But I spent $25 on Bill and Ted, but one, I get to own it and watch it whenever I want to. It's not on a streaming service. Yeah, I had other points, but I don't know. Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
Do you think Soul will stick?
Yeah, I
For
do.
theaters and then
I do,
cross.
just because now we're getting to the point where they're pushing properties into other properties. They have other things coming down the pipe or the pipeline that they can't keep shoving things up. We're gonna have a bottleneck next year.
They're probably doing a budgetary thing where they're like, what costs the most and would hurt us the most to lose money? And right now it's things like, Black Widow. So they're trying to protect and like crater Black Widow and like keep moving it away from this pandemic.
You also have to look at the financial dollars. This is an end of year release that has an opportunity if put across many platforms. Say it pulls in $75 million, like Trolls World Tour, which, by the way, Disney Pixar will do better than Trolls World Tour.
I should hope.
If they do that, knowing how good, what is the one with the emotions?
Inside Out.
Inside Out. Knowing how well that movie did, I believe Soul is going to be just an outstanding movie. The opportunity at the end of the year to pack $75 to $100 million straight to the bottom line, business-wise, recoups loss. It puts money back in your bottom line that is also liquid asset that you can use to produce new movies next year. It makes sense for them to keep it. I think as we get closer to the end of this year, we're going to see more of these actually stick than be held because they're running out of room next year for movies.
Right. You can only push so many blockbusters. Like, this coming summer could be real thick.
Very. We have joked about that today multiple times, that this could be...
Time to reactivate A-List.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I'm going to see a movie a day for the next year just to get caught up with the basics.
Well, going on the same date, so Soul is supposedly coming out November 20th. We have another movie that also is supposed to come out November 20th. It's 007, No Time to Die. I will try to speak unbiasedly because I'm not the biggest James Bond fan. I've watched some of the Daniel Craig ones. They're not my cup of tea. It's a British joke. But yeah. However, just looking at what the movie is, I don't know. I think maybe they could push it because no matter what, it's always going to carry the clout of being Daniel Craig's last Bond movie.
Correct.
So I think that has some gravitas unto itself that could survive a move. But like you said, 21 is getting very dense. But it's also, I feel like it kind of has its own fan base a little bit.
Correct. It's not part of anything else that it's really competing against. There's not another spy genre that it's going against.
You can put it against, I'd say, anything other than maybe Mission Impossible.
The only other thing I'll say is all the other, I don't know how many of the Bond movies, but all the Daniel Craig Bond movies were in the same week of November, every one, consistently. Oh. My brother's birthday is the 17th of November. Happy birthday to Kelly when we get to that point. But Kelly, for his birthday, goes and sees the new Bond movie every year. There's one of them coming out.
You know what? There's a Marvel movie my birth week every year, and guess what I've dealt with for the last 2 years?
But I'm just saying that's my I know that those are always in the same window, and sometimes studios want to stick with that nostalgia portion. However,
Star Wars has done it with December.
If there's a movie, yeah, exactly. If there's a movie that does get pulled out of all these, I would say this one, because this one lifts the easiest. Because it's not really, as far as a genre, going to be competing against something of its type anywhere else. It's just not. The only thing, and like you said, it carries the Daniel Craig's final movie as Bond. It has that weight with it. So people are going to want to see it wherever it comes out because it's the closing of this chapter. We know that this is it.
This is 007 Endgame.
Correct. And it's going to be the completion of his arc. The question is who picks up the mantle after him, whether they carry forward with
Lashana Lynch's character,
whether she becomes Bond and takes up 007, or they insert I know several names, but Taron Egerton or Edgerton.
There's some people that want Tom Hardy. There's a lot of people
Tom
like
Hardy's,
me that want Mr. Cavill.
There's a lot of people who even thought Idris Elba to go a completely different direction with
My thing is, I don't care about the race. He needs to be British. Or close.
Henry Cavill would be fantastic, but he's massive. He's bulk-wise, he's huge for this role, especially because he just. Rumor is that he will be continuing as Superman, which means he needs to maintain bulk. Plus, with Witcher, he has to maintain, and he's under contract for Witcher for I think 2 more seasons.
He's going to be real busy.
Correct. I just don't see Henry Cavill coming through, despite the fact that I would love him as Bond.
I just loved him in Man from U.N.C.L.E., and that's kind of where my mind's at.
He's good in a lot of stuff, and you and I are of kindred spirit in that he is the ultimate Superman with his portrayal in Man of Steel. But we won't get off on that tangent today. Yeah, let's throw it down. I believe because we're lifting him off in this, and Daniel Craig, it will be his final one. You can easily take this one out of the series. Sorry. And you can easily pull him out and put this movie in another time frame and still have it work. Or you stick with it, and that could be even more reason why Disney would want to move. Why would you want to open up against a Bond movie? Now, granted, kids movie, adult movie. Completely different audience is going to see both.
Because the genre is similar, I wouldn't want to have 007 too close to Black Widow.
That's true, but
there's a small overlap, I think. Not a huge one.
I think it's small, but I still would put them in different categories. The people I know who are diehard Bond guys aren't necessarily diehard Marvel guys.
Well, like I'm a diehard Marvel guy, and Bond, could take it or leave it.
Correct, and there's a different customer for each.
Sure.
And that's fine. And some people do like the crossover. They can enjoy either movie, but you are playing to a different grouping there. But just because you're going to move it to the following year, I don't think that means that you're necessarily going to have to run the same weekend.
Right.
And most movies have their huge peak in 2 weeks. So you get, as long as you're not within 2 weeks of the other movie.
I have a question for you that's kind of raising with all this and with 21 getting as dense as this. Do you think movie production, not just because of COVID, but is going to slow down because they want to kind of filter through some of this and not overstuff, like just have like super stuffed years like back to back to back to back, like all the way into like 25?
I think there's a lot of great movies that we were supposed to see and get that we will never see and get because of what has happened. that they've had to make very calculated decision on what movies to even make, what movies to shelve,
What they can finance.
the
'Cause
dollars.
they do not.
There are literally billions of dollars currently tied to movies that have still not seen the light of day.
Right.
Billions.
I mean, look, Wonder Woman 84, I would say, if none of this happened and it just came out when it was supposed to, is almost a guaranteed billion, I think. Because I think the first one made around 800 when it was a unproven property. People weren't sure about it. But then people loved Wonder Woman. Aquaman made over $1 billion. I don't see why Wonder Woman couldn't do the same.
I think Wonder Woman will, if done correctly. The question is, how do you do it correctly? And everything's second guessing because everyone is the guinea pig on the first round. So, I think that. Well, and the other thing with that is Wonder Woman. One of the reasons to get that out and get that making as much money as possible is that funds the production of the next movies down the road. Like you said,
Also, if
it
you
keeps other
time
movies
it-
getting paid.
So depending on when, I forget exactly when it's supposed. I know it's going to be in 21, but we have the Snyder Cut coming out for Justice League. If you keep those kind of close to each other, one could benefit the other.
That is the only reason I have HBO Max.
I'm using somebody
So
else's for other reasons.
let me just stop this entire podcast and say I care about 0 movies going forward until I see the Snyder Cut of Justice League, because I don't have enough time to tell you all the reasons but I have to see that because I believe there's something better than what we got. And I do have faith in Zack Snyder. Man of Steel. Okay, let's go back.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. The Watchmen, 300, Immortals, Man of Steel.
Ultimate Edition.
No, Man of Steel. Yeah, Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition. Those are all good. Now, regular Batman v Superman, thank you, Warners, for crapping on a movie. Ultimate Edition, when they add the half hour of quality material back in and redo the storyline in a
Cohesive manner.
in a manner that makes sense. All that leads me to believe and have faith that Zack Snyder's Snyder Cut of Justice League will be worthy of the dollars. And you're right, Wonder Woman could benefit from that. So
I want to move on to the next 3 movies are all in December. 2 of them we can just kind of go over pretty quick. Death on the Nile, which is kind of a loose sequel to Murder on the Orient Express, and Free Guy, the video game-esque parody comedy with Taika Waititi and Ryan Reynolds.
Yep.
I just hope that they follow the same approach as you. I think it open where you can and where you can't put on VOD.
Yep. I think we're going to see a huge shift until we know theaters are open. We're going to see VOD happening much more regularly, and they're learning on how to do it properly. I think that's going to be the next big thing, because again, we can't keep pushing back. And Free Guy, that's not a $500 million movie in the box office. It's just not going to be. It's going to be good because Ryan Reynolds still has a huge amount of box office pulling power.
But I think it falls under the Bill and Ted category.
Yeah, it's going to be a 150 to 200 range movie. It costs probably around $50 million to make, and that's with adding in probably some advertising. And so I think that's an easy one to make your money back on video on demand. Death on the Nile, again, that could also be pulled and put on another day because nobody
unless you have Ryan Johnson making another Knives Out-esque movie, you don't really have a lot of competition for that.
Correct. It's
really small point. Did you see Knives Out?
Yes, fantastic. Yes. But that's the thing is that movie easily lifts because it's not anchored to anything else other than kind of being the sequel to Murder on the Orient Express. But it's also kind of one of those quirky movies. It'd be like Wes Anderson coming out and making another movie and people freaking out about it being in the box office. Wes Anderson movies can go straight to video on demand and people will watch them because they're just random weird movies. They're great. It's kind of like I would say it's more on the line with like Jojo Rabbit, which is not breaking down the doors as far as box office dollars. But
I had to wait forever
movie.
to even be in theaters around here. Like I kept hearing reviews for it. I'm like, how can I watch it? Finally, it came, and once it hit our theaters, I saw it twice in a week.
Oh, great movies that are that I think can easily make back their money direct on video on demand. So there's not the need for them to stick to a hard date, or they can stick to the date, just go video on demand, do a hybrid, say it's out everywhere. We'll make our money and we'll walk away. The only I know I've said there's multiple movies that get pulled, even though I began by saying that all of these are going to stick. The only movie that I actually believe, I think all these stick with the release date other than Dune. Dune is the only one
That's what
that
I was going to say.
genuinely
This is the big one
believe
for me.
would be pulled because the amount of... This is the $200 million investment that has to pay off. And it's actually more than that.
It's franchise potential. It's the one, again, like you're saying, out of all these, that has... Wonder Woman can survive a bit of a hit because it is a proven property and people love Wonder Woman. And if the movie's good, people will say it was just extenuating circumstances and they think they'll still push forward. If Dune fails in the way that Blade Runner failed, because it's Denis Villeneuve, I can't say his name. It's Denny again.
Villeneuve.
And he does beautiful artistic movies. I have not seen Blade Runner 2049, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard it's fantastic.
It is.
I'm not... The first Blade Runner didn't do it for me, but the second one, it looks good. I don't have any qualms about it. It's just like, I felt like it was a bit heady for me.
It's one... Blade Runner 2049 was much better if you loved Blade Runner. And also if you were able to see the mini movies that were made for the time frames in between to fill the story in. But again,
it got nominated for like all kinds of awards. There was great acclaim for it. It was reviewed phenomenally, but again, like a John Carter thing, it was advertised poorly because Blade Runner came out in the mid 1980s. And even the original Blade Runner didn't make a lot of money. It became like a cult classic over time.
Correct.
And so you have this property that you're just expecting people to understand. And like I get what Blade Runner is about, but there's a lot of people that haven't seen this movie, were either born after or whatever the circumstance may be. So when that movie came out, there's nothing in the trailers explaining what it's about. It's just like, we have Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford, and it's a future sci-fi movie, and that wasn't enough for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, that it wasn't, and good, but again, it didn't translate as well. Now with Dune, one of the hard parts about in Dune, the original one, cult classic, people love it.
I just watched it for the first time.
It's crazy.
It's a
weird.
thing.
It's a movie, but it built the careers, a lot of unknowns. That's kind of what they're trying to go with this movie as well, is some unknowns, but they added in a lot of really... Josh Brolin's in it, and I'm going blank on some of the other people, but it's got a
Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Dave Bautista,
great cast.
Stellan Skarsgård.
Again, you're bringing in some heavy hitters, but you're intermixing some lead people who are newer.
Some veterans. Some thespians.
Yes. Good quality actors, but there's so much built on this that it could be a huge long-running franchise. The hard part with the original is they took this massive catalog of books and tried to squeeze it into a movie. And now this one is like, how do we treat this properly?
I just did the Audible, the 22-hour Audible for Dune in the last week. It's amazing, but I instantly understood the challenges of the book. And then I came to find out that in an interview, Denny told Warner Brothers, I would love to do this with the caveat that it has to be at least 2 movies for the first book.
Yeah.
And I was like, because the first book is like yay thick,
No,
and the
it's
rest
massive.
of them are thinner after that.
Yes.
But the first one is dense. And as I'm listening to, every page is like almost a full conversation. Like there's descriptions in there, but there's a lot of like talking and exposition and like understanding. I was like, you can't do that in 2 hours. So I think what we're getting is like 2 movies that are 2.5 or 2 hours 45. And I was like, I do think you can get it in 5+ hours. Possibly.
But if you mess up the first one, you're screwed for the second one.
The thing is, he has my confidence. Even not seeing Blade Runner, I have confidence in him as a director, and the cast, I think, is like 90% spot on from like what I visualized in my head reading the book.
One thing I think going for it, I do think they'll move the day. So I know.
I guess that's the original point. I'm very excited for Dune, but I think it's going to move too.
I think to our original thing, I know that I want to clarify this because if anybody's listening, if anybody listens to this, I know I said that every one of these could lift out and be moved. I believe every movie will hold its date other than Dune because Dune has more writing on it than all the other ones.
Well, Dune, I feel like, has the capacity to be our next, kind of aimed for adults, but it's going to be both our Star Wars and our Lord of the Rings moving forward.
Sci-fi fantasy. Yeah, it's amazing.
Because listening to it is like a Lord of the Rings book with the dialogue and
dense.
It's really dense.
Very dense. I love Tolkien, and I've read almost all of Tolkien's works, including the stuff that's all pieced together by his son and put out there. I love it all. I digest it all day long.
It's funny because Frank Herbert that did Dune also had a son that continued on his franchise.
Mm-hmm. And the challenge is with that kind of weight hanging on it, they can't miss step one. Now, and we haven't had a dystopian society book or movie series in a little bit. We had a huge influx of them for a little while, where after Hunger Games, which was a monumental success, then they came out with the Divergent series, which was the first one was okay,
and
second
Maze
one got
Runner
worse, and the
well.
third one they just put out to get out, and it went straight to DVD basically, which is the worst thing you can have for a movie. Maze Runner, first one was solid. Second one was, or first one was solid for Maze Runner. I think Scorched Trials was the second one.
I think so.
And the Cure, or the Killing Cure, or something like that, is the third one. The problem was with the injury to the lead actor, who almost
Dylan
died.
O'Brien, I think.
Almost died filming it. They lost 6 months. It postponed the movie for over a year. It lost momentum. Those were the last kind of dystopian society stories that had that were built in with a multi-part series.
And Dune is not a YA novel.
No, it's not a young adult novel. Well, most young adults would look at the size of that and be like, okay, nope.
I have 10-hour shifts by myself, so me just plugging in an Audible, I just powered through for like a week of work.
I digest books the same exact way, because while I'm driving around doing delivery stuff or things like that,
I just can't read anymore. I mean, it sounds lazy, but it's not. I just can't sit and read anymore.
It's really hard. I read, because I'm a pastor, I read for a living. And so when I get to pleasure read time, I hate picking up books. So I put in Audible and I listen to that. So I'm either listening to podcasts or I'm listening to books and taking them in that way, because I'm also an Audible learner and I like to absorb that way.
Yeah, podcasts. What a great way to absorb information.
Absolutely. I know. So with that kind of bringing this back around, you would have asked the question, which one of these are you most excited for? And I'll be honest, none of them really stir my soul in a really powerful way. I want to see all of them, but if I didn't see any of them, my life would alter very little. I would say it's either, there's three. I'll take the Wonder Woman, 007, or Dune. And I'm torn on which one would be the one that's the most. Probably 007, just because I know it's the end of an era for Daniel Craig, and I do like him as Bond. And I know that's a mixed thing to say, because there's heated feelings about whether he's great or not. I like Daniel Craig. Dune would probably be 2. So I guess I am putting it in a series.
For me, Dune, and then so 3 would be Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, Dune is, which was funny because it was already number 1 before I read the book. Like, I just knew, like, between the cast and the premise and like some of the reading and videos that I watched and stuff, I was like, this should be absolutely phenomenal. But I'm also like, now that I've read the book, I'm like scared and protected of this, not because I fear that it's going to be bad, but I want it to do well so badly and just like vehemently. It's like this fire in my freaking loins. I was like, because I think it's so important, because it's unique. There are so many properties that everybody knows well that built off of Dune. Now that I've now begun listening to the Audible of Game of Thrones, I see inspiration from Dune. Star Wars has inspiration from Dune. It's like across all these various fantasy and sci-fi things you can see ties to. And I want the selfish part of me wants to be able to watch something and experience something that's like a Blade Runner, that's very heady and dense and has a lot of high concept things, and then be the end of that pompous guy. It's like, well, you just don't get it.
Oh yeah, well, there's nothing better than when somebody tells you about a movie and you're like, have you read the book? And then they go, no, and you're like, well, let me tell you something about the book.
I'm already that guy, and I hate myself a little bit, but it's...
That's how I am with Tolkien. I can't wait for... And I'm not just a Tolkien, like I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I'm a Tolkien, I read The Fall of Gondolin, The Ballad of Beren and Luthien, The Children of Húrin, The Silmarillion, the books that actually make up the universe that Middle-earth is in. And so for upcoming future things, you have this series for Amazon where they're going back to the line of Numenor, where Aragorn's family line comes out of, one of the coolest parts of the Silmarillion, and even though it's brief, is this story of how Sauron crushed the island of Numenor and the line of kings by penetrating to the inside and killing them. I cannot wait for that series. Yet I hear people talk about, oh, there's a new Lord of the Rings thing. Like, do you really know what you're talking about? And so I am the same kind of pompous guy for Lord of the Rings that you are becoming for Dune. And I am afraid to digest all of Dune beyond the first book, just because I'm like, oh man, do I really want to like do that to myself and take away some of the viewing pleasure? Because now when I watch Lord of the Rings, I love it, but I'm constantly saying this isn't how it is in the book.
It really sounds like, I don't know if you know this, but you saw the Dune trailer, right?
Oh yes.
Did you know there was also a 15-minute behind the scenes featurette that they released?
I haven't seen that yet.
Oof. Well, I think 2 minutes of the 15 minutes is the trailer at the end.
Okay.
So it's like 13 minutes and then the trailer. Denny seems to be an absolute purist for the book.
That's what you need. In the same way, Peter Jackson's a purist for the books for the Lord of the Rings. And a lot of people hated The Hobbit because it took some liberties, but at the same time, The Hobbit didn't actually fit in with the rest of the Lord of the Rings. He wrote that first and then wrote the Lord of the Rings.
Instead of adapting the book, he adapted the concept of the book tying into his Lord of the Rings movies.
Correct. And so there's he filled in a lot of stuff happened. He filled that in from the untold stories of Middle Earth, Lost Tales of Middle. There's so many extra little things that Tolkien wrote to fill in those things. And with Dune, I would prefer to have a purist to the story, because at least then what you're going to get is true. The extended cuts of Lord of the Rings are the best way to digest them, because they fill in all these little extra details that really enhance the picture. Whereas, and I believe hopefully they'll do the same thing with Dune, that what you'll get is true. You're not getting some mutated version of it. My biggest fear would be that the studio would come in and say it's too long and try and chop it, because we've seen what that does to movies. Who's the studio producing Dune?
Dune is, I think, also...
Just say
Dune's Warner Brothers.
Dear goodness. That was what I was hoping you wouldn't say.
I'm pretty sure.
Because they are the most notorious for crapping on something that's long, because, we got to make it palatable for people who won't care. You pander to the fans, Ryan Johnson. You pander to the fans.
With Dune, one of the changes that, and this doesn't really mean anything for anyone that doesn't know the characters, but the main antagonist of the first Dune book is Baron Harkonnen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, and he said he really wants to stay true to the book, with the exception that he felt that Baron Harkonnen is a bit of a caricature and not a compelling villain. And I was like, you're not wrong. Like, I just read the book and I agree with you. And he's like, so I want to add some depth, and I want people to see him as not just a character, but like, he's not human, but you know what I mean. Like, get inside his mind.
The best villains in movies and books are the ones where you do get to know them beyond that they're the one pulling the string for the bad stuff.
You don't have to like them, but to understand what their their purposes or why they're doing what they are. So yeah, Legendary and Warner Brothers for Dune. You got Tenet came out, Wonder Woman's supposed to be coming out, and Dune. They both have to try to make as much as they can from these movies, but also separate them.
Yeah.
And without throwing them all into 2021.
On release dates that are 1 week apart for Wonder Woman and Dune. I think you lift Dune.
I agree. Because Dune is the unproven property, and this is not a time for the unproven properties. That being said, like, in a perfect world, I want to see Dune more than Wonder Woman. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
However, if Dune tanks, I'm never going to see another Dune. So I have to try to be the, adult.
Well,
and
we could advance ourselves into a fantasy reality where theaters are back open. But that's probably not going to happen. So, sorry.
All right, so I think that's it.
Awesome.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for us today on the Flick and Reel Fancast. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. As we talked about the desolation of one of our greatest passions and how that's going. I hope that soon enough we'll be able to share excitement for what comes next instead of questioning how long it's going to be until something comes next.
Let me just say this before you completely wrap up. I am excited for these movies. The disheartening part is some of these movies will be cast into oblivion because they did not do well in the box office, and that's a sad life for a lot of these movies because they deserve to get the same box office showing, they deserve the same attention, and we're not getting that treatment because of what's currently going on. I understand we have to be respectful for COVID and lives lost and people who've gotten sick. This is just one more of the ripple effects that COVID will have for a long time. There's not an aspect of life it will not hit. So,
all right. Well, so with that, be safe, be smart, and may the film be with you.